So, the question I want to ask is, courses, workshops, I've done a bunch of them, including with you. Always a good time. I always leave feeling that I've learned something, I've gained some knowledge. There could be epiphanies, some really big moments of, great highs, lows. But ultimately, workshops end. And what matters is the aftermath, the alone time you have, and in those moments when you're not with your coach or your brothers, what have you taken? What have you embodied? What have you gained? And so a guy who's interested in doing your workshop, what could he expect to take away in the aftermath? You know, when the group chat has run its course and the guys are back to their lives, so to speak. What
Yeah.
changes, lasting changes, can he expect to access, you know, whenever he needs them?
So for context, you're asking me about the liberating sexual presence, which is the fantasy
Ex-
workshop that's new,
your 8-day workshop.
newly developed. Yeah. So I mean, most of perhaps most of the work that I offer to men is what you would call shadow work or deep dives into unconscious or unknown parts of the human psyche. Most of my offering is based around that. And I get your point. Like when you're in one of these workshops, it can feel like a really fascinating psychology seminar where all the ideas are new and yeah, you get homework and you relate some things back to yourself, but it feels like this fantastic place. And then the workshop ends, right? Um, but I'm not offering these just as kind of a bit of psychology school applied to uh, your adult interests, your love life and your relationships. I'm offering these deep dives into your own psychology because it's a search for results and opening and being able to fundamentally change your life experience when it comes to sex and intimacy. That's why we do it. So yeah, it's kind of full of new ideas and technically interesting. um, the way I think of it is a house, right? So imagine you live in a house, like a big house, a mansion, and the house is your psyche. So when you do a personal investigation into what is there in your psyche, it's like you're walking around your house and you're opening different doors and finding out what's there. Like imagine you inherited a house from a wealthy grandparent or something like that, and you hang out in the ground floor, but you don't really go upstairs and look in all those old closed rooms, and you definitely don't go into the basement and try and find out what's down there. But what if you went into the basement and started opening the doors and finding out what's in your house? Well, there's a whole treasure trove of uh, items, curiosities, possessions. There might be untold riches hidden down in, Granny's old jewelry drawer down in the basement. Granddad might have left some interesting, I don't know, guns, swords, chains, chainmail, shackles, whatever. We all kind of live in a haunted house in a way, and there's rooms in our psyche that we don't go into. Or if we do go into them, we tend to go into them alone and not allow other people in there. So if we think of, you inherited a haunted house analogy, you might just hang out in one half of the ground floor where you have your bed and the kitchen and the TV room, and that's about it. But there's a lot more to explore. So in the work that I do, and particularly in the fantasy work that I'm doing now, the invitation is to go down into the basement and look in a couple of the rooms down there that have to do with your erotic life, right? What do you think about when it comes to sex? What turns you on when it comes to sex? What images haunt you or haunt your psyche in a way like, why do I think about these things sometimes? Why do I think about that woman in that way? Why, when I'm having a sexual fantasy or a daydream, does it end up like this? Why this dynamic? Am I something strange with me, or is there something not quite right? If my friends found out, I'd be really afraid. I'd be afraid that I'd be really stigmatized and ridiculed. But you might have some secret erotic rooms in your mansion in the basement that you get a lot of pleasure from, right? And one of the secret rooms, we could say, in your haunted psyche is your internet browser history. So when you go downstairs and open up your laptop and type in your X-rated video site URL, what do you bring up? What do you look at? And generally, we are looking for a particular dynamic, a particular type of model or actress, a particular type of thing that happens in that scene. We're looking for the perfect image. So deep in the erotic underbelly of us, deep in our psyche, there are things that turn us on, an exorbitant amount. And there might be a lot of different sexual things that people can do, but we all typically have one or two hot buttons, one or two images, types of women, types of energy, dynamics, locations, how a seduction would unfold. Maybe it's a threesome, maybe it's a school teacher. Every kind of porn video has its category, right? And every fantasy has its kind of category. So what really, really excites you and brings energy up in your body? So I'm inviting people to go in and look at what's in those rooms, but look at what's in those rooms in community and to share it with others. Now, the reason that this is important and what happens after the workshop, right? You come and you talk about your sexual fantasies. Not only that, but you do like a deep embodied kind of meditative process that I guide you through that has to do with your sexual fantasies. What good is that when you go into the rest of your life? Well, let's say the workshop finishes on a Sunday afternoon, and then Monday you get up and you go to work. Yeah, your energy feels different because you just had a good weekend workshop. Tuesday, same thing. Wednesday starts to tail off and you return to normality. And then it's like, well, I had this nice workshop high. What's useful about this? Because it's not every day that you're going to need to go into the basement and access this room, right? But let's say, for example, 3 weeks later, you find yourself in a house party and there's 8 or 10 people gathered around. People have gone home, the music's low, and the conversation turns towards sex or kinks or turn-ons or sexual fantasies. Now, when I was young, when all my friends at school or in college would start to have this kind of joking sexual conversation over a glass of wine, I would just like shut my lips, tighten my belly, stop breathing, and just pray that they would change the subject to like music or football or traveling or something that I could be very free around. But as soon as the topic of sex came up in the room, I was petrified that someone would just point at me and say, Jordan, what's your experience on this? And then I would have to kind of paddle really, really fast to come up with a story to look cool or to show everyone I had some experience that I didn't have, or that I didn't make a mistake. I'd be just the right amount of sexy that wasn't too much that I was a pervert, but wasn't too little that showed that I was inexperienced. So this whole kind of face management and trying to survive conversations about sex and what do you want or what's your kink or what's your desire, like that would just make me clam up. But let's say you've done the work and you've gone in and you've found freedom, acceptance, love, enjoyment, pleasure around what's in what your sexual secrets are, what your erotic secrets are. When that conversation comes up in public, you can sit back, smile, and join in with everybody else. It's a bit embarrassing to say, but this is kind of what I like. Or, if the right woman came along, this is what I would do with her. And you'd have to, I feel now, the freedom to say these things in the right way. And it's not just so that now I feel laid back and comfortable and cool in a dinner party when everyone starts talking about sexy things, but it's on date number 1, date number 2, date number 3. And this is the real reason that I'm doing the work around sexual fantasies, is because men go on dates and like I used to be in the dinner party, they they stiffen up and they tighten up. And when they might want to have flirtatious banter around erotic themes, or when the woman starts flirting with him, he has no freedom. Or when he's like, I want to take you home, but I also want to take you home and do this thing that's a little kinky or a little different, or this is kind of what I would like. There's just not the availability to say those things in a free way. So imagine if you could, on your first date, on your second date, on the third date, when the subject turns to sex, say what you want, say what you like, say it with an open heart, say it with love for your own self, and say it in a way that because you enjoy the content of your erotic life, because you enjoy that, you say it in a way to her that is laced with enjoyment. And she might be like, well, no, thank you. I don't want to be tied up and call you daddy, but like, I love the way that you at least shared that. That was really freeing. Maybe we could do something else, but I don't want to do that scene. Anyway, thanks for saying, now that you say that, this is what I like. Maybe we can meet in the middle and, I'll do one for you, do one for me. But then you enter into an authentic, vulnerable, open kind of exploration, negotiation of what you might do together in intimacy. And typically what, the average for men in our cultures is, I'll show up on my dates and I'll get it over the line and I'll take her to the bedroom and we'll have kind of quiet vanilla sex where I don't risk too many things because I don't want her to think I'm a freak. Well, that's okay, but the erotic exchange is just on a low hum when it could be filled with so much vibrancy and dynamism and love and joy, which I think all sex should be involving a hell of a lot of love and joy and laughing at your clumsiness, while at the same time daring and pushing some edges. And I think, like, just going back to the general topic of shame, which maybe we'll dig into a little bit more, underneath shame, so shame is an emotional mechanism that has us kind of repent or fear doing anything that's a little bit strange in the context of the tribe. Because I feel shame, I would then say sorry. Or because I feel shame, I would then not do transgressive things that would get me kicked out. So shame is really important and protects us in a kind of community, tribal context. But what lives underneath shame often are the things that make us most alive on a primal, visceral, emotional, and possibly spiritual level. And what lives beneath shame are our greatest taboos. I want this sexual position with this kind of woman. Someone said to me the other day, I want to approach a woman and take her home without saying a single word. That's very edgy, but I can resonate with that longing. How beautiful would it be for two bodies to come together and be able to commune without the bullshit of speech? That's a really valid fantasy. And so the act of doing something like that would, for most people, be terrifying. But if it were ever to happen, the surge of life force, the vulnerable surge of aliveness, of meaning, and then, when it happens, the gratitude and the shared gratitude with her that you did this thing is revolutionary in a person's life.
I had read a few of the testimonials that you published on your course page, and two of the men who worked with you and did this, because you did a trial of this and you tried it out on a select number of guys, and
Yeah.
two of them said that their sexual fantasies that had been very much unexamined, at least in depth, uh, downright caused the failure of multiple relationships, right?
Mm.
They lost out on relationships because of these unintegrated fantasies. So I'd imagine that, apart from the sort of this rapture that you speak of that can come of when you do fulfill these fantasies, what else opens up, or even as a result of that revelation, like what can open up in the life of someone practically when they have done this work, they have examined these fantasies in a company of men who are non-judgmental and holding space, including yourself, you know. Um, and I'd also like to talk about the mechanics, but in terms of the sort of, yeah, like the practical, what does that mean for someone?
There's a couple of different directions I could go with this, right? And there's with the particular testimonial where the man said, having this fantasy for so many years has destroyed a couple of relationships. I would want more context about that, so I could say I don't fully know what he means. But for example, there are fantasies that fit into the realm of the possible, and the constructive, and there are fantasies that fit into the realm of the impossible, or if it did happen, probably destructive. So let's say your fantasy is more on the possible and constructive side of things. Then one thing to be able to do is to relate to your fantasy and relate to your urge in a more accepting, whole way, which is, God, let's say I've got this fantasy and I don't want to share it with anyone because I'm really embarrassed. But if I look at my fantasy and if I look at my feelings of embarrassment and if I kind of get into the how I feel about this whole thing and come to a deeper level of acceptance and enjoyment about the fantasy, I can then start sharing that more freely. And that will be an invitation that many women might like to step into. So a lot of men have said so far in this work, God, my fantasy is like really explicit and raw. And someone said yesterday, I was brought up by good parents, and I don't know why I think these things. And I listen to the fantasy, the things that he wants to do and what he wants to do with a woman and give to a woman. And I'm like, what woman wouldn't want to receive that? His carnality is very strong, but it's a gift. And the right woman in the right place in the right time would love to receive that. So in half the cases, let's say, a man's fantasy, he would benefit from having a better relationship with his own fantasies and his own drives, because once he did that, he would be able to present them in really beautiful ways and share them, and he would be able to live them out, and that would be a gift to the women that he's with, right? So and a lot of guys are in a relationship with a woman and they don't actually speak what they want or what they imagine or what they visualize, to the point of long-term marriages where the husband has got the browser full of porn, hidden stash of magazines, whatever it is, a very vibrant erotic life, and none of it is actually shared with his partner. Like, this happens even in our most intimate relationships. The keys to the rooms in the basement are just locked. The wife never comes in there and sees what we actually want. That's sad, because it could be the exact thing that would reignite the relationship and take it to another level of energy, of meaning, of love, of care, of humor. So to answer your question, for half the people, it's a case of finding more love and acceptance in what you really want so that you can bring that as a beautiful invitation. For other men, the fantasy might not be realistic or even possible. For example, I think we talked about this last time, the Don Juan movie, he ends up in some Persian island with 1,500 women in a castle, and his fantasy is running a Persian, going to a Persian castle and having a harem of 1,500 women all dressed in kind of satin and silk. Like, that's very unlikely, right? Or a 10-foot woman, giantess fantasy, or there's countless things that would not be possible. Aliens, or going back to your 13-year-old self and going into school and basically helping yourself to any of the girls that you had a crush on. It's just not going to happen. We all aged. We're not at school anymore. And if you were to go back and do it, it'd be illegal, terribly illegal. So there are fantasies that are impossible. Um, but we investigate what constitutes a fantasy. And what is a fantasy? We haven't even had the conversation. And there are different types. A sexual fantasy might be, I'm walking down the road and I see a woman and she's got one hell of a body, and I just imagine taking her clothes off and seeing that thing and having her. I think of that for 20 seconds and then I go about my day and I never think of her again. Right? It's just an eruption of an image in the psyche. We see someone, it triggers a thought. I'm sat on the bus. I think of a conversation yesterday. I want her. 30 seconds go by and nothing else. Right? But and what I think in my experience so far is there is something deep in the psyche, deep in the human soul, that contains a bunch of images, and our primal kind of sexual survival instinct just churns up images from time to time. I think all of us succumb. You might know this if you ever have a hangover, or if you ever do an ayahuasca or some real deep hallucinogenic journey. Sometimes we go into a phase where the thoughts get really raw and swampy and dirty. Sometimes in a hangover, I have sexual thoughts that I wouldn't have in the day-to-day life. The primal beast is just closer to the surface in those moments. But a lot of men have other fantasies which are long drawn out. They're like novels. They're like 13 novels in an edition. Like the finesse and how well orchestrated every single moment is, and who the woman and who the women are and how it happens, and the power plays and the transformation of the people in the fantasy. Some people can spend hours actually in a long novel playing these things out. And typically, if you have the same fantasy over and over and over again, and the reports that I've read on this seem to say that most people have a primary sexual fantasy that kind of takes up 70% plus of their erotic life. If you keep returning to that same fantasy again and again, you might ask the question, why? What is the fantasy trying to do? Where did it come from? What happened in your life and your upbringing and in your sexual conditioning and in your triumphs and in your failures and in your rejections and your humiliations? What happened throughout your life to shape your desires and your fantasy life as it is? And this is, for me, some of the best psychological terrain that is. And in there, we can find not only some beautiful, life-giving, interesting kind of erotic resources, but we also find a lot of wounds. So a lot of our sexual fantasies are palliative dissociations, kind of things that we play with to make ourselves feel better in situations of distress. So if there's a way in your life that you're suffering, you feel distress, you're not getting certain needs met, you're unhappy, a fantasy or a daydream is a psychological form of escapism that you can run to. You can create your own world where you get all your fantasies met, right? So let's say I'm feeling powerless and I don't feel any woman's really looked at me over the last 6 months. I feel scrawny, I feel unsexy. Well, in my fantasy world, I can add 3 inches to the size of my penis. I can grow massive muscles, and I can walk into the local nightclub and everyone gets on their knees and worships me, right? So whatever distress I feel in my life, or whatever kind of emotional wounding even I had in the past, or particularly at school, so much of our schoolyard, where we fit into the pecking order, and a lot of those kind of brutal moments in the schoolyard constitute into the tapestry of some of these fantasies we have as adults. So there's realm for healing here. And let's say you have a fantasy where literally you're ripped and you're powerful and all women say yes to you. Well, that's not going to happen in reality. So how do you make that happen in reality? Well, you can't. But the fantasy is trying to give you. It's the psyche's best way of trying to make up for this lack. I feel powerless in my life. Therefore, I'm going to create a fantasy in which I have unlimited power. I feel unlovable in my life. I'm going to create a fantasy in which I'm completely loved. And the reverse. I know I'm like throwing so much stuff out here. And the reverse. I'm powerful in my life and I'm loved. And I'm going to create a fantasy in which I'm powerless and I'm humiliated and not loved. The inverse. So we're seeking inner feelings that we don't naturally have. The fantasy gives us a way to do them, but it's a dissociation. We can't really do much with that in life. So what I'm offering is a process where you identify your fantasy, you really study the intricate dynamics of what you fantasize about, you share it with the group, which is incredibly vulnerable and, you know, brings up a lot of feeling in your body, a lot of sensation, a lot of kind of this knife edge, shame energy, taboo energy, life force energy. It really brings all of the participants on edge. And then whatever wounding, whatever distress, whatever unhealed dynamics, whatever missing confidence, missing worthiness, missing love, this fantasy is all about. I take you on a guided journey so that you can embody all that. Because ultimately, the power comes from the not having the fantasy as this daydreaming thing that you look out the window of the bus and you're. And I've had guys say I can spend between 1 and 3 hours a day just in a fantasy, fantasizing about this impossible thing that's not going to happen, or if it did happen, would destroy my relationship. Well, we work that in a way. We work the wounded parts of it. We work the frozen parts of it. We worked the way that trauma was involved in building this fantasy. And, you know, the guys that I've spoken to after the workshop have said, you know, I don't think of the fantasy that much anymore. It's hard to get my brain to think about the fantasy so much anymore. Meanwhile, in my body, I feel more energy to get on with my life. So what if you could claw back 2 hours a day that you spend in some disassociated fantasy, or looking for the porn video that matches the thing? Maybe you're scouring porn, looking for the perfect video so you can get a hit of the energy that you're missing and that you crave. What if you brought that energy back into your body and felt it? That's what I'm looking to do with this. And then, you know, now that I'm not having, you know, these grandiose fantasies of being Don Juan of Arabia with my harem of 1,500 women, what if I feel, you know, I'm the king of the harem, I'm Don Juan. I feel more of that energy in my own body rather than as a fantasy. I feel it. And I walk down the street and I might not be any better with women. I might not have any, you know, clever lines or stories, but I feel in my spirit, my heart, my soul, you know, there's a little bit of me in here that's kind of worthy of the harem of 1,500. I own that. That's in my presence. That's what this work is looking to give.
So are you saying that by doing this work, well, actually, let me back it up. Like, if a guy's having fantasies, we all do, but if a given, you know, man has a certain fantasy that does occupy a lot of his time and takes him away from something else that he likes, you know, to invest his energy on, is the mechanism essentially working with you in the context of this workshop and, you know, in front of the other guys, and just sort of becoming comfortable in that energy and accepting it and welcoming it? Like, what is the actual practical aspect of going from it being up here or in the dark corners of his basement, so to speak, right, being sort of this very obsessive thing, to him walking down the street feeling like he's the man, or feeling like, yeah, I am that guy, right? And it's no
Yeah.
longer this shameful part of himself, but it's who he is, and he loves it, right? And he's comfortable.
Yeah.
importantly in that, like, what is the journey from shame to acceptance, from it being hidden, it taking up his time, to it giving him life?
So the reason I'm offering this workshop now is because I recently had I developed a new method that took my work, my sexual fantasy work, my sexual energy work, my sexual confidence work to another level. And for a lot of years, what we did, we had a module in our old mastery course, and the module was all about the erotic psychology and healing sexual shame. And the way it worked was that I asked everyone to write down their top one or two sexual fantasies and their top one or two peak lifetime erotic experiences. You know, the best erotic experience you ever had that made you just feel alive and grateful and awestruck and wonderful. So one or two fantasies and one or two peak experiences. And then we'd share them with the group. And the act of sharing already brings up the shame, but then the collective acceptance and the safety of the brotherhood all around you has that shame kind of dissipate, and you end up just feeling the aliveness of the fantasy. So in a way, one way to heal shame is to speak the things that you're ashamed of and realize that the tribe accepts you and is not going to kick you out. And even more, realize that the tribe actually celebrates you and enjoys with you, like your wonderful, peculiar humanity. And that in and of itself is transforming. And so we would look at some of the sexual fantasies that the guys brought, and we can do some pop, Freudian analysis. Oh, this is, you have a big breasts thing. That's because your mother didn't give you this, and you always longed for more cradling and attention, or you have fancy about domination because your mother didn't allow you to go and play with football in the street with the older kids or whatever, and now you've got this revenge. Like, I mean, that's like really basic pop, but we would look at the fantasies and just be curious, like, why do you choose the beach in the tropical country? Why do you choose the toilets in the cemetery, or like whatever place you do? Why? And you can map back into your childhood, your teenage years, your life, where all these different influences come from. And you can do a self psychoanalysis, and then the output of all this is that later on you can be with a woman on a date and just feel more acceptance and say, you know what, there's something I've always wanted to do. How about this? And watch her face and her mouth drop and see if she likes it. So you can release the shame, you can do a little pop psychoanalysis, and you can summon the courage to start sharing it a bit more with women. That was the fantasy work 1.0 that I've been doing with guys for a lot of years. And we do all of those steps in the workshop, right? Warming up, preparing the safety of the brotherhood, the telling of the fantasy. Like, this is all core to loosening the fear and the defenses. Okay, it's my turn. I'm terrified. I don't want to share this with you all. I did sign up for this workshop. I know this is the work that I want to do. Okay, I'm going to jump into the freezing cold water and show you what I want and who I am, right? And in this basement, in this dungeon of my psyche. What's new now, though, and what I've developed this year is a guided technique that helps men not only just share the content and some of the feelings they have when they talk about their fantasies, but actually embody the very particular feelings that are in the fantasy. So there's an embodied aspect to this, which is new. So, for example, let's say you have in your fantasy, you're a stud, and you have 10 women in a big long line, and you just go from one to the next, ramming everybody, right? And in your fantasy, you've got tons of erotic energy just coming up through your legs, and you're just like throwing it out your pelvis in front of you. You're just railing dozens and dozens of women. But in your normal life, you're disembodied, you're numb, you're not this guy. You find it difficult to stay balanced on your 2 feet. what a discrepancy, right, between who you are when you walk around the world, light, no center of gravity, all your energy is like up here in your head, but in your fantasy, you're this driving kind of stud. Where is that energy in your waking life? Well, in your fantasy, that energy exists. So in the process that I guide you through, you get to learn how to associate with that energy as it moves through your body, which is, if you have energies of being this, utter stud, well, the potential for that energy moving through your body is there. You just haven't become conscious of it yet. It's numbed, it's dissociated, it's blocked somehow. And so with the process I guide you through, it's like, yeah, let that energy fill up your legs. Let that energy fill up your pelvis. What does it feel like to sit in your body and feel yourself in this present moment as the stud with this strong moving energy, thinking of these women that are bent over waiting for you to take them? And then you sit for a moment and allow the body, with awareness, with consciousness, with our support, allow the body to train itself to conduct this erotic energy through it. That's part of it. There's other parts of the process as well. Like, I would ask, let's say you're railing this woman from behind and you're giving her literally like the strongest, most dominant fucking. What does she feel? Most guys are like, oh, I never thought about that. My fantasy was totally self-centered. What does she feel? So you go in and you can feel, what does she feel? What does the next woman feel? What do they feel? They feel complete adoration and gratitude and love, right? They feel powerful and unleashed and strong in a feminine way. So I invite each of the participants to embody that as well. So a lot of, most men that I've ever known undergo some quality of a split between their heart and their sex, which is the energy of love and romance and loving feelings, and the energy of, I just want to, fuck and rail and dominate and conquer and penetrate. And there are psychological reasons, and there's a lot of cultural conditioning that drives this wedge. And it's talked about as the Madonna whore complex or paradox, right? There are women in our life that we kind of project holiness and salvation and reverence towards. Oh, she's so pretty. I could never imagine doing these things with her. We fall in love and inspiration, and our heart energy goes into some women, and then our lower moving energy, our desire to take, a strong taking, rapacious energy. We look at another woman, yeah, that's a whore. I would take her. Wouldn't have a relationship with her. Wouldn't even want to present her to my friends. But in this moment, I would give her that. And so a lot of us act because of this inner division. We have love and sex lives that look like that, right? So you have your wife who is angelic and she takes care of the children, and then you have your, I don't know, dirty soirees to the strip club or that city, down below the border that you always go and visit once or twice a year to get your rocks off, or the woman that you have on the side, or your secrets, your sexual secrets. So a lot of men find it difficult to, with the same woman, bring full heart energy and bring full lust energy together at the same time. It's very difficult. It might only happen actually a handful of times in a normal person's life. So there's something in this process that I'm guiding you through, which is get in touch with the full dark taking force of your lower energy. At the same time, you get in touch with the spiritual force of your upper energy, the love. Ideally, you're having sex and you're feeling love. Ideally, you're fucking hard and you're feeling gratitude. And these two energies can merge and come together. This has been one of the great revelations of my journey, particularly my embodiment journey, particularly my journey with women that had to do with my own psychology. To make love with a woman and feel complete sexual attraction and complete loving, grateful love, and feeling all of that at the same time with the same woman. So what we're coming out of this this embodied fantasy work with is, by the end of it, you have felt all of these different aspects of yourself at the same time, and they come together and merge. And interestingly, let's say I'm putting on this event and I'm saying this is an event for you to reclaim your sexual power, your erotic power, your deep masculine force. A lot of guys will sign up because they want more erotic power. I want to be more of a stud. I want to walk in and into the room and everyone looks at me. It's typically what motivates us. And yet, the common thread of the work so far has shown me you get your masculine power by dropping into a more cohesive experience that includes relaxation, that feels self-comfort, that feels safety in your own body and your own skin, that feels equanimity. And that's one of the strange paradoxes here that I find. All of the guys that had a strong, lusty sexual force, their embodied sexual force was magnified because they found within themselves resources of safety, relaxation, surrender, gratitude, peace in the midst of it. And I mean, everyone left in a kind of spiritual state in a way.
Well, I mean, sort of informally, you and I were referring to this as a fantasy workshop, and for a second I thought, so like, is Jordan going to teach us how to be this fantastical sex god? And then I thought, well, actually, that's not even what women want, right? Like, it is a very safe, comfortable, embodied man who may not be the foot long cock, and like, it's not that, right? Like, I think guys maybe mistakenly think that that's what they need to become.
Yeah.
I think you'd agree it's actually a much more balanced, centered.
I love the word. I think we can do a full scale redefinition of sex god and what that means. Because most guys that I've ever met that wanted to be a sex god, they went to do kind of special tantric techniques with fingers, and they can do their fingers and rub, and I can do the fingers and the rubs and the breathing and the motion, and they go after techniques. But actually, what I think a sex god is a normal person who can bring godly qualities to sex. And godly qualities actually are qualities of loving kindness, deep inner peace, utter acceptance with everything that's happening, love for the fellow human, and gratitude. So a sex god is someone who brings and feels and embodies the qualities, sublime qualities of God in sex. And then whatever you do with your fingers is just an artful expression of the moment. And it's good to have some good things to do with your fingers and ways to shape and turn over her body and positions to come into. But that's just technical details. The real thing is how deep love, bliss, pleasure, joy are you feeling when you come with your partner into the sexual act? And yeah, this is exactly the thing that I'm looking to deepen and unleash in the bodies and the body minds of the people that do this work. Well, yeah, you asked me right at the beginning of this conversation, what do guys actually take home after this workshop?
Yeah.
Right, because you're not going to come out of this and then start talking about sexual fantasies with every single person you speak. I mean, you might, some people do, but typically you're just going to go back into your normal life. But your embodiment's going to be a little bit different. So, for example, every single day, I don't walk down the street feeling like a stud or feeling like a Don Juan with a harem, just because I've done a lot of inner work and a lot of inner erotic work. However, sometimes I do. So if my mind is not too busy with work and, the sun comes out, I can walk down the street and have spontaneously, without trying, really beautiful feelings of feeling powerful, dynamic, erotic pleasure, lust for life, without doing anything. Sometimes my psyche and my embodiment just shifts into this beautiful sense of power and pleasure. And sometimes I do see a woman on the side of the road, and I look over and I check her out, and I smile at her. And as I smile at her, a my heart comes through my smile, and my passion or my desire comes through my smile. So my eyes and my smile are charged with an erotic beauty as I look at her, and she looks back at me as well, and it's a juicy eye contact. And I might just like nod and then keep going. Or if I was single, I might stop and talk to her. But my approach is now filled with this great feeling. So it's not like every single day I'm running down the street like a throbbing hard on, right? But some days I walk down the street and I feel really, really good. I feel really good because of this embodied work. I get in my head like everyone, but then I can come out of my head and return to something I enjoy. But the core of it here is, Zan has said for a long time, our sexual desire, our erotic nature is a God-given gift. And I feel that because I feel how the sexual images I get, the different desires, the sense like I would do this with you, I could do this with you, I would want to do this with you. The way those feelings come through my body, I feel such a positive relationship to them. I feel them as inherently joyful, inherently a gift that involves the heart. So I feel sometimes naturally, cometh the moment, cometh this feeling within me of, yeah, godly love of my own sexual nature, which is very different to, let's say, 10, 15 years ago. I would feel like my sexual motives and drives were more of the devil rather than of the God. And I would look at women down the street and I'd look at them through these hard eyes. Cool, I'd like a bit of that. Okay, better not let anyone see what I'm really lusting after. I'll compress and hide, and I'll turn into this little devil goblin figure, lusting after women and trying to hide it. I had the same energy coming through my body, but my whole relationship with it was, I secretly thought my sexuality was kind of devilish, lewd, unpleasant, unwanted, and separated from anything spiritual or loving or beneficent for her. So I would never have said these words, but clearly my programming was, I believe that much of my sex life is kind of lusty devilry, devilishness. But through these kinds of practices, I've come to feel it as like, it's erotic, yeah, but it's a gift, and it's full and rich and sublime, and I'm not going to impose it on anyone who doesn't want it, but I am going to vibrate it and enjoy the energy and attention of the people that respond in kind. So that's how I feel. And like I said, I might not think of these things for 3 weeks, but then I go on the first date, then I go into the dinner party, and when someone brings up the topic of sex, I'm just like, I don't need to impose myself, but I'm ready if someone asks me. I'm going to feel good when I say my things here. And some woman in the group will be flustered, and another woman in the group will remember what I say, and someone will come into my direct messages the next day, and the tap there is open.
Well, I absolutely resonate with thinking that your sexual nature is work of the devil, or somehow a force to be overcome. All that language is very familiar to me, and
Mm.
uh, actually, even just through my work with you, I've definitely come to, even through using like the language with which I speak to myself, in a way that completely changes the narrative, right? Um,
Mm.
and in fact, yes, there is a way of viewing your own sexuality that is not destructive or harmful, but rather uh, loving and giving. You know, I think that
Mm.
it's something in our culture it's you don't hear that very much, right? And
Yeah.
your circle is one of the few circles that I know of that that narrative is spoken of and is promoted. You know.
Yeah. And again, you can try and reframe it. Yeah, my sexuality is a God-given gift. My sexual you can give yourself affirmations and try and that can
Sure.
be good. But somehow you have to get in your body and teach every cell of your body. You have to teach your whole nervous system that this is actually a fact. And that's more than your brain trying to convince yourself that your sexuality is good. It's almost a full body discovery of like, I feel the goodness and the connection with my heart with all this energy. It's an irrevocable fact that all my sexual energy has a fundamental goodness and gift to it. But when the body and the nervous system learns this profoundly, that's a very different experience than I heard it on a podcast that my sexuality is good, so I'm going to try and change the narrative just in the brain. Because the body typically is a few years behind the brain, right? The body is often the slowest place to learn. So that's why when it comes to sex and sexual energy, I predominantly am working with direct experiences in the body.
Yeah.
So you can prove this kind of thing to yourself.
When we spoke off camera, yeah, you know we were talking about a lot of guys, you know, will go to Brazil. Like, Brazil is sort of their initiation. But you know, and you said, well, what about a guy who is working on a business and can take 4 months off to go to Brazil, right? Like, for example, and and that for me was fascinating because uh, I had always operated on the assumption that, well, I need to live out these fantasies for them to be satisfied and to use the word sort of complete the loop. And I want to, you know, ask you, and just so I'm clear on this, and for those watching as well, stay clear on this. Um, does your work involve essentially having a guy experience, if it is Brazil, his Brazil fantasy, sitting at home on Zoom in his chair or on the floor, wherever he is? Like, are you essentially giving him that experience via his body? Because he would feel it in his body if you were in Brazil. He's just not there. But
Mm-hmm.
can he have that same closure,
Mm.
you know, in his North American bedroom?
Okay, I mean, this is a huge question and a beautiful one. And I just want to kind of poke that he could have this experience in Brazil and not be present to it either and go home unchanged. So there's
Yes.
the possibility of actually going all the way to Brazil and living there for a year and having such and such a woman and then not even feeling it when you're there because you're disassociated and numb. And then you disvalue actually the intimacy. You're not connected, you're not present. So that's a possibility. But I was thinking of a client of mine today who, when, you know, like many of the men that we work with, found himself utterly split between, I feel a strong need and commitment that I cloister myself away in my North American bedroom and I crank out this business and I you know, pay off my loans, my debts, and do things with my family, and I take this big, profound leap into adult responsibility. You know, a lot of men are like, I need to do that, and therefore my erotic life, not just my sex life, but my erotic life, including all of the sensory enjoyment, you know, the food, the wine, the late evenings, the tropical breeze. Well, that I'll have to kick that can down the road a couple of years because it's not imminent. I need to do this thing. I need to go monk mode, right? So a lot of men live in a division, which is there's the me that needs to do this in the world, but there's the me that fantasizes and craves and dreams that I could be living a different kind of life. So some men will go and live that life, i.e., they will go to Brazil and have the wild, sensual, you know, passionate goddess, embodied siren who gets them out of their mind and initiates them into what lovemaking really is about, right? That's our northern, western, exotic, fetishist view of what Brazil is all about. And down in Brazil, they're all going to the, you know, countries where we're from for a similar exotic experience. So yeah, some men think, and certainly in my early 20s, I thought, well, my erotic life in England is quite grey, and I'm quite grey. And I look at the women around me, and they seem quite grey. I need to go to Brazil so I can get some color. And I went to Brazil, and Brazil did have a lot of color, and bit by bit, I became more colorful myself. Right? It was a slow burning initiation. But does every guy who's grey have to go and live in Brazil to go and get this? And roundabout coming back to your question, and I would say if you have the luxury of the time and the money or a digital job, it's cool to go there, learn the language, meet the people, really understand the beauty of this culture is bewildering. It will be with you for life. But if you can't, then I would say that what you think Brazil is, what you project onto Brazil, is really just the color and the vibrancy and the sensuality and the passion of your own psyche that you have disowned and not embodied. And I would say if you are living in a grey, cold, boring northern country and you're dreaming of going to Brazil, you're having fantasies of Brazil, the reason you're having these dreams is because part of your character is Brazil. Part of your character has the virtue of sensuousness, abundance, carnality, passion. Those things you associate and therefore project onto Brazil, they are actually in your own psyche. And you can, I believe you can do a serious amount of embodiment work, shadow work, which is the fantasy work that we're doing. You can do things like this and discovering your own body, that you are as sensual and as outgoing and as gregarious and as passionate as the Brazilian archetype you have in your mind. You can discover that. I discovered that by being in Brazil, but I discovered it going home and realizing, well, actually, all the women in England are colorful and sensuous when I am colorful and sensuous first. When I go to England, I don't see gray women anymore because I made myself ungray. I made myself colorful, and wherever I go, the women seem to be colorful. That way I got out of a tremendous prison and can appreciate my erotic life everywhere. So maybe you'll have to go to Brazil and have that experience, but I think a hell of a lot of work can actually be done within your own inner psyche. And curiously, I'm, at my age now, I never think of going back to Brazil.
I've noticed that.
I would. I would. There's beautiful places, beautiful people. Rio's like, but I mean, half the country is gorgeous. But I don't need to go there to get any feelings or to try and become someone that I'm not already, because I have that all within me.
Yeah, and that, while there's certainly nothing wrong with going to Brazil, or now, if your fantasy happens to be illegal or downright, you know, uh, what's the word that you used when we spoke off camera?
Probably a little psychologically destructive,
Depraved. Yeah, exactly. You may not want.
depraved.
Probably you don't
I
want to
take
do
that
that.
word. I take that word back. Yeah, depraved is a bit too judgmental for the nature of the work. Where it's like I really strive to look at the yearning for love that is in the depths of every fantasy.
Yes. Well, actually, and so this is interesting then. So, a fantasy that may involve pain or violence. Do even those fantasies have that sense of love and compassion coupled with the desire for dominance and suffering?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Could you speak more to
Um,
that?
Revenge or vengeance can be a theme in fantasy, and with that, you inflict pain on the other person. Well, typically, you inflict pain on the other person to receive a kind of apology Like on the one hand, you um, can feel a grandiosity, like how it would be for you to feel fully empowered in the situation. So that itself is a resource. And then what you do to another person to inflict pain, typically, if it's coming from a place of like rage or vengeance, rage is a full bodied form of anger and hatred. And why would you get angry about something from somebody that you love or that you desire? So if you love a girl or desire a girl and she says, no, let's just be friends, and you feel rageful or angry or hatred, well, you feel those things because the initial impulse was to be loved and you got refused. So I think my suspicion, and there's going to be so many different personal particularities of this, but deep in the midst of a revenge or a hate fueled fantasy is going to be the pure rage and anger of the pain and the rejection, which is a response to the initial desire for love and for connection that was denied. So I inflict pain on her in my fantasy because in some way I want her to feel my pain. I want the pain that was felt to be processed, and I want an apology. I want her to say sorry. I imagine in a lot of the bottom of these revenge fantasies that ends up in a sorry, you were right. Like I now I see the light. You're such a good fucker or whatever it is. That there is some kind of redemption or salvation if you to follow. I think if the man who had this kind of fantasy life were honest enough and courageous enough to follow the fantasy right to the very bottom. As I'm not talking about the half-flesh fantasies or the surface fantasies. I'm like, okay, you have this fantasy. Let's go right into the very bottom of it. What is down there? Yeah, actually, there's the initial desire to give the love and attraction that I have and receive it in return, to be seen and mirrored and have empathy, and that this beautiful woman I'm idealizing also sees the beauty in me, and I want the sorry, I want the apology, I want my pain to be seen and heard, and I want my dignity and my goodness to be restored. And these are some of the salvational qualities in the depths of a really dark fantasy. And as BDSM and sacred BDSM and the kind of more conscious aspects of dominance and submission gain a bit more traction in our culture, they're talked about a little bit more. There is more of a recognition that like dom sub play 20 or 30 years ago was people dressing up in cheap leather and throttling each other with, ping pong tablets or like whips. It was all about the external paraphernalia that you would then buy and then put on, and there wasn't awareness of really the core desire, but there is now, which is in the depths of the core to submit to somebody, is the desire for utter surrender of responsibility, which is I can fully let every sinew in my body go and have a spiritual feeling release. And the urge to dominate is to actually be so in love with somebody that I will give everything of my attention to them. Like you're only going to be a compelling dom in this kind of play if your attention is razor sharp constantly. And that's why you get these ridiculous, or maybe not ridiculous, but Christian Grey or whatever, or these kind of dominant types in women's erotic literature are always billionaires and surgeons and kind of evil genius people, because they're so smart, the quality of their attention and their presence is so crisp. That in and of itself is actually an emanation of masculine love. So to dominate is actually an expression of masculine love in its sacred form. So I would say guys that have a fantasy of just like, yeah, I want to get this revenge, in the midst of that is the deep spiritual quality. If you really didn't like women, you would just never think of them. You'd be indifferent. But if you have this pent up thing, which is I really want to dominate them and put them in their place, you love them. You got a thing. It's a very twisted love, maybe where you are, but you got a thing for women, and you can't shake it. So I would say work it through and let your urge to dominate be filled with the love, which I would say is innate, which is the root of this fantasy.
Oh.
Yeah. So one has to dig deep to find these levels, but if you find these levels, you'll be able to give your dominance to a woman as a gift, and she would like to receive it as a gift.
Now, what's the difference? Because like a guy could, in theory, do this on his own. What is the benefit to having you there? What is the benefit to having the other guys there? What is the benefit to him doing this work in the container of your workshop, your fantasy workshop?
I mean, I just don't think someone could do this work on their own. You could do the cerebral part of it, but to guide yourself through a custom meditation that's going to get you in your body is like you're trying to be the coach and the therapist and yourself
Yeah.
and the client. I developed a lot of this work, and it's taken hours and hours. It would just be so much easier for someone else to do it. But if you don't know the inner mechanics, you won't be able to do it on your own.
Right.
Even if I wrote a book with instructions, you'd still want to go to the workshop. But the beauty about doing this in community is other people see you in your process. So particularly both in the aspect of speaking things that you're ashamed of. Like one of the biggest pieces of this workshop is speaking your fantasy for the first time or the second time, and the words coming out, and you look around the Zoom room. If this were live, you look around the circle of others, and they're all leaning in, and they all still want to be connected to you. This is the fundamental healing balm for shame. As we said at the beginning, shame is the emotion that comes up when there's absolute fear that we're going to be kicked out, ostracized, and abandoned by the tribe because there's something wrong or inhuman or amoral about us. So to speak the thing that you're ashamed about and realize that the tribe actually loves you more and will remain in connection with you means that the thing that you fear is not going to get you ejected. The thing that you fear to share about your authentic self has a place and is worthy of receiving love and respect from other people. So we even talked about this before. This is an experiential mismatch. I believe that my insides are so devil-ridden and fetid and rotten that if I share them with other people, they're all going to run away. But if I share my devilish insides with other people, then everyone's still there saying, hey, what a great share. We're totally on your side, brother. We love you. Then I have this mismatch, which is I thought these things were too bad to be shared, but life is showing me that I can share my shame and the things I'm ashamed about and still give me love. My whole vision of self and self-worth and reality and what is good and okay and what is not allowed and not okay, that gets shaken up and re-understood. It takes me a little while to integrate this or get over this experience, but it's proven to me that I can share my secrets and people will still like me or want to include me. That's the healing part. And then another thing I would say is you work with your fantasy until it comes through to its kind of spiritual end, which is you realize in the depth of your rape, violent, vengeance, domination fantasy, there is a profound gift of love that you want to give. And it's love. Your attention and your awareness is love. And that's what you want. You want to saturate a beautiful woman with all of your attention because that's who you are. And you're like, wow, this is who I am. And then other people are like, they see you in that as well. So they see you not just in the lowest step of your shame, but you've got a group of brothers and obviously a guide that's going to reflect back to you. Anthony, yeah, this thing that you feel right now that you think is really edgy, I see that as a profound form of spiritual love. This is who you are. That that within your desire to dominate and to lead and to be so strong and powerful is actually a desire to give love. And I might just say, does that feel true? And if you're in it, you're like, yeah, I can't believe this fantasy ended up this way. I thought I was depraved, but actually my whole body is vibrating with love. And so it often takes a mentor to be like, yeah, the thing that you're feeling is real. It's a really important kind of revelation. And it's happening. And this is you. This awakening, this acceptance, this realization of yourself as being love or being consciousness. This is a thing. You're not, this isn't a thing that belongs in books. It's also you, and you're having it now, and we see you, and we're thrilled for you. And we had the experience, everyone would go in and do their process work. They would do their personal journey, which is this psychological voyage into the shame and the darkness, and then out the other side into the light and into the spiritual qualities. If someone else is working their fantasy and you're watching, you'll go on that journey with them. You'll feel aroused if you're really paying attention, you've done a little body work for the warm up. You'll feel aroused when they feel aroused. You'll feel the shame when they feel the shame. You'll feel the conflict in the fantasy when that arises. And in the end, when they come to the love, you'll be like, I'm feeling love. Like I'm listening to this guy's fantasy and I feel love and bliss. And so everyone in the room feels as the presence, the sexual presence is liberated, is rising. Everyone in the room gets that. We all kind of meditate together. So one person does the work, we all do the work. That's, collective. Transformation is perhaps even always a collective pursuit in this way.
Is that why you're keeping it to a relatively small cohort?
Yeah, we're keeping it small because I need to guide everyone through a process. Yeah. So there's no way I could have 20 people and give everyone time and attention to do this work. Not at this stage, unless I find a new way of doing it. But yeah,
Right.
every man will have two in this iteration, two fantasies worked in full to completion over the 8 days.
And the way you're scheduling this course is also very interesting. Is it the first time that you're doing this sort of multi-day intensive online?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's this is kind of the work that in an ideal world we would get a nice sexy yoga shala in some jungle or by some beach, right? We'd be out in nature where there's no interference. And maybe I'll do that next year or in the future. But for the time being, this is a personal, intimate workshop, and it works wonderfully on Zoom. So we'll cut out the travel and the expenses of the airfare and the hotel and all that kind of stuff. We'll be able to do this work directly wherever we are in the world.
And I looked at your breakdown. So there's an intro call. I believe it's the Saturday before. Is it the 26th of July, I think?
Yeah. Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll get together for a very, very brief intro call, and I'll just say hi, and I'll give a bit of homework for the week. And then we'll have 5 days just to do 15, 20 minutes embodiment practice a day. I want everyone to come in a little fit, like having done some embodiment practice for at least a week before coming into this. There'll be a WhatsApp group. So if you're struggling with your homework and you have a question or you just feel inspired, you can share with the others. We'll get the conversation going. And then on Saturday, the 2nd of August, we'll do a full 8-hour day. So we'll start off by doing a full day's work. Everyone is really going to get the format of the work by spending 8 hours with it. And then each day after that, we'll meet for 4 hours each day, and we'll go deeper and deeper each day until the end.
Wow. And so is it like you said, I think two participants will be able to share each yeah, like how does that work? So is it you'll have like kind of people viewing and then the next day they can share, or what?
Yeah, so typically each day will be we'll meet for about 4 hours on Zoom. Every day, two people will come up and share their fantasy from start to finish, and we'll do the full fantasy work. That can take, let's say, around 90 minutes per person. And then we'll have a bit of time for check-in, like, okay, those that worked yesterday, how are you feeling today from the day before? And then at the end, you'll be able to ask me, what are you interested in about this work? This person just shared this fantasy. What questions do you have? What does that bring up? So I like in my workshops to have a bit of time where we talk shop, like what is the nature of the tools that we're using and what is actually going on in the psyche. So we can talk a bit of theory around this form of transformation as well as we go.
Wow. I'm really curious to hear what comes up. You know?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
what some of
Me too.
the like even perhaps my own. I have my own fantasies, but I wonder sometimes if what else is out there. And what I haven't even considered, and what just viewing someone else speaking to their own fantasy might elicit in you, right? Like, wow, I'd never considered this part of myself before. Wow. Or perhaps awaken some dormant fantasy that you didn't even know you had, right? Wow, that's exciting.
I mean, let's just say everyone who comes and does this workshop, I want you to be 2 feet in. Like,
Yeah,
just realize that if this theme and the way that I'm talking about the this topic here and the layout of the workshop resonates, like if you feel the call, just jump 2 feet in. Um, and jump 2 feet in with your own work, looking to get as much value and juice out of your own work as possible. And when you are sitting as a participant watching one of your course mates share his work, I promise you, when someone shares their fancy, is better than anything you're going to watch on TV that night. It's better than anything you're going to read in a book. Everyone's shares have wonder and surprise and miracle and edge to them, and they're riveting. And if you think about it, some people have spent a decade actually refining their fantasy. So with a little homework, I'll invite you in the week to write it out, so you just get to know the nooks and the crannies and bring a bit more consciousness actually to the layout and the dynamic of the fantasy. But when every man came and shared it in the group, they were astounding, like very like ornate handiwork that was presented. They were better than literary award-winning short stories. I can tell you. Yeah, really, really beautiful kind of artifacts of psychology.
wow,
Yeah,
wow, wow. Okay, and so for a guy who is feeling the call, what
yeah.
what do you do?
Check out the enrollment page. So arzamarata.com/LSP, Liberating Sexual Presence. Read through. If if you've got a grip on who I am and what this work is, just sign up straight away. Many people in the workshop will be returning clients that come back and reconnect to do another chunk of this work. But if you're really new, let's say you're captivated by this interview, it really feels like it's for you, but you don't know me, you're a bit hesitant, something in you is a little bit afraid, drop me an email, jordan@arzamarata.com. If you want to jump on the phone for 30 minutes to share your excitement, but share your concern, just talk one or two things through with me before you go all in, I'll be very happy to do that and make sure that I want to make sure everyone is going to have a little bit scared parts of their psyche coming into this. There might be like, yeah, I want to do this work. I want this transformation. I want to explore. But everyone is likely to be, as I said to the guys that we did before, this is an ordeal. This is actually an initiation to come in and do this work. And it should feel to some part of your psyche that you don't know if you've got the courage or the guts or the mettle to go through with the vulnerability of this. And for sure, there should be one or two parts in you that are a bit apprehensive at the least. So if you have something in you that if you feel cool, but there's a bit of apprehension, I'd be very happy to chat with you on the phone and just make sure you have ways of holding that apprehension as we go through, because it is edgy work. Men have lived 50 years and not shared these parts of themselves before. You might think this is beyond your comfort zone, and yet going beyond your comfort zone is the place you need to go in order to have the growth and the release and the transformation that will take you into another stage of your embodiment, of your intimate life, of your capacity as a man walking through the world.
Well said. Would you say that there's like that, because presumably a man might want to share these fantasies with a woman. Perhaps it's easier for him to first share it in the company of open to listening men. What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have the courage, because it might take a huge leap of courage, but if you can do that and share it with a woman, either because you have a lot of courage or because she's very safe and you just feel that she's a safe landing place for you, then by all means go and share that in your life, and see what happens, right? See if you can do something with that. But if that leap feels big, this, I think, is an awesome stepping stone. But also, even if you share these things with women and you feel like it's still stuck, the fantasy keeps going round and round and round. You like thinking about it, but it's also bothersome. Like it's a burden. You want to be able to move through it and onto something else with your life. Embody what it has, but move on. If you've got this feeling like this thing is rattling around and you just want a new lease of life after this fantasy, then this is a transformative work that, even playing it out in your in intimacy doesn't always get to. Case in point, the domination bit. If you feel a drive to dominate, and even if you're dominating your partners, if you don't feel that sense of love coming through you as you dominate, there's an extra dimension of depth that you could get to. And this is what this work will look to bring you.
Yeah, I know you have decades of experience in both in sort of field experience and self-examination. So I'm sure whoever takes the leap of faith will be in excellent hands. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll enjoy it. As edgy and as scary as it can be, one thing we all felt so far in this work is the enjoyment, like the genius of the psyche, the miracle of what we eroticize, and then the energy of the taboo. Once we say these things and allow ourselves to be seen, the energy of taboo that comes out, and the whole theme of coming out of the closet, this is another version of coming out of the closet, with your particular eroticism. I've known people that were in a state of depression and on medication for 15 years. And when they came out of the closet and said, you know what, I want this, and I want to present myself in the world as a man who does this and wants this. I've seen amazing transformations in the ownership of one's real desire.
Wow.
Thanks for the beautiful interview, Anthony. And yeah, everybody watching, I hope to see you inside. And feel free to shoot me an email if you're on the fence or you have questions or concerns about the work.
Okay, Jordan. Fantastic.